Welcome to the Hauenstein Center's new online program, Lunch and Learn. I'm your host, Gleaves Whitney. During our stay-home order, we may not be able to journey beyond our homes, but that should not stop us from journeying beyond our minds. Today's journey takes us into the complex minds of our children. Our guide is Ellie Harnden. Ellie recently graduated from Grand Valley State University with a bachelor's degree in special and elementary education, emphasizing cognitive and emotional impairments. She also earned an award for academic excellence in special education. A couple of Fridays ago, Ellie completed the requirements also of the Peter C. Cook Leadership Academy here at the Hauenstein Center, and all of us at the center congratulate her. Today, we're going to talk about her work helping children cope with trauma, especially during this difficult time of high unemployment, rising substance abuse, domestic violence, and suicide. My conversation with Ellie will go about 20-30 minutes, followed by questions from our viewers. Feel free to begin sending your questions to us right away using the Zoom toolbar to do so. Ellie, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, first, congratulations on graduating, and what a way to begin your career in the middle of a pandemic.
Never thought that would happen.
So as I mentioned in the introduction, you just earned a degree in special and elementary ed with a focus on cognitive and emotional impairments. What is your education at Grand Valley and your experience in the classroom and in the community trained you actually to do?
I think my experience in the community and in the classroom at Grand Valley and beyond has really trained me to kind of see through the minds of the children. Every child's different and every perspective is different. So really honing into looking through a child's eyes, but also that relationships are key. Never underestimate the power of a relationship, and also empathy. Empathy is like the biggest and most important thing you can have in teaching, and then trauma in any relationship is having empathy.
And you have a personal interest in all of this. Tell us why, Ellie.
So I have a personal interest in trauma because when I was younger, when I was 9 years old, I lost my older brother unexpectedly in a car accident. And so as a young child, I experienced trauma, and not until I got into college did I really kind of process that trauma. But when I knew I always wanted to work with kids and be an educator, but then I started volunteering more with kids who also had trauma, and I had a conversation with a child who lost a sibling as well. And it was like, wow, I can connect and I can use my passion, but also my experience to connect with these kids. And it really was eye-opening for me.
Well, understandably, you have specialized in trauma. For our viewers, how do you define trauma?
So if you ask Google, trauma could be defined as a distressing or deeply traumatizing distressful event, but I think trauma can be defined. Everybody's definition of trauma is going to be different. So for me, in my experience, when I think of trauma, I think of death because that is what I experienced. So my definition of trauma, however, not necessarily the case for maybe you or for my friend. Her trauma, she struggled with diabetes, so that could be her trauma, or a child who parents divorced. Trauma to them is divorce. So I think it's really important to recognize that there's a whole spectrum of trauma, and every person and every child experiences it. It's just in more ways than one. And I think it's important to realize it's any type of event that has a discomfort, feeling of discomfort for a long period of time.
And what does the most recent science say changes inside the child's mind when they've experienced trauma? Maybe the biochemistry, what's the science say?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my classes at Grand Valley and in the College of Education, this is something that we've focused very heavily on. And a lot of professional developments for teachers and educators right now are very focused on this topic. When a child experiences trauma, any type, it can affect their brain chemistry. But if you think about it, the more trauma that you have or a child has, the more profound effects they have. So in some cases with severe trauma, like neglect and abuse, it can change the amygdala and the fear, fight versus flight aspect in a child's brain, but it also can affect their learning difficulties, how their relationships. It's a whole large piece to this big puzzle. But what we're finding in schools is that students are experiencing trauma, or children with trauma are increasing at a very alarming rate. So we're trying to figure out how to go forward and adapt our schools to be more trauma informed. I had the privilege in February to attend the National Council for Exceptional Children Conference in Oregon, thanks to the leadership in Hallenstein Center. They were very fortunate to provide me the opportunity to attend this conference through Independent Initiative. And there, a lot of the focus was on talking about how we're going to transform these schools to be trauma informed and help these kids.
Do you think COVID-19 has exacerbated the sense of trauma in children?
Yes, absolutely. But I think it's also important to realize that it's not only exacerbated in children, but it's also exacerbated in adults. It's very kind of ironic that there's a time and place in this, or that everyone in the whole world, the whole entire globe, is experiencing the same type of adversity. And I think it's okay to understand that even adults, we're having this trauma, and that's okay. But again, my trauma with COVID is going to be different than a child's trauma with COVID. A child could view their COVID experience like, oh yeah, I get to jump on the trampoline every day and stay up late and don't have to go to school. But another child's experience, if they have more trauma on top of that, like, you're just adding more to the, like, more straw to the camel's back. So we don't know. So there's children definitely who live in very traumatic backgrounds, and they have very diverse aspects, and they can maybe live in a household where they're not getting their needs. As a child, all their basic needs need to be met, and they're not maybe getting those basic needs. So when you add COVID to it, you're just adding more trauma, and that's just going to keep continuing and piling on. I like to think of analogies like in Disney, because I'm a big Disney fan. Have you seen the movie Moana?
No.
No?
Sounds like I should.
In Moana, at the very end, there's a big lava monster, and its name is Tafiti. And Tafiti just keeps getting bigger and bigger with the trauma that she's experienced. And that's kind of how I imagine this going on with children right now. They're feeling, are having all these emotions, unable to control their emotions. And so what we need to do as adults, we need to be Moana and speak calm to Tafiti and help guide these children through this experience.
Oh, that's a great analogy from a movie. I use those all the time, and I think they're very helpful in teaching other people how to view these things. Well, how has the coronavirus pandemic changed the way you view what you do? I mean, your perspective on trauma, but more broadly, your view of your profession now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really, I mean, for any educator right now, we would have never imagined that we would be teaching from our beds for 6 months or from our homes. And I think that's something that we were always trained to teach in person. And in person, we all can agree on is more effective and what the children need. But the hardest part is trying to adjust how can we still meet these children's needs, but there's this huge disconnect with equity. So what if there's some children that have access to technology or have a computer, and there's other kids that don't? And so I think that is a huge kind of perspective to me, and the fact that it's okay if we don't teach academics right now. I know, but it's okay if we don't. We need to focus on the mental health, and we need to focus on letting these kids enjoy outside and the beautiful sunshine, and enjoying more of how to handle all of this trauma that we're experiencing.
But how will these kids make up their academics, what they're not learning now?
So in the state of Michigan, she said that all students are going to continue on unless they have different situations. They're not going to be held back. So in terms of academics, we know that when students or teachers, when they're exposed to material, when teachers expose children to material on a daily basis, it builds up their stamina and it builds up their knowledge. of their material and their academics. However, when you take that away, then it's slowly gonna, their process or how they learn it is, or the information that they know, is gonna stay stagnant and then eventually drop. We talk a lot about the summer slope in the summertime, and I think that's a huge thing that teachers are really nervous about, is all this progress we've made this year, we're really afraid it's gonna drop. But what's more important in my perspective, and I know some other educators can agree, is that the social emotional health has to be a priority over the academics, because before students can successfully complete their academics, they need to feel comfortable, they need to feel safe, they need to be able to identify their emotions. So I think right now, a lot of what teachers are trying to do, and what I'm trying to do on virtual learning, is giving these strategies to children about how to cope with this, and how to just be happy and enjoy this moment in life.
What about the adults in these children's lives, the parents, the caregivers, the teachers? What if they're now unemployed or abusing drugs or experiencing domestic violence? What's happening with the children when this is happening around them, and the adults they live with and work with?
Absolutely. So we all know that as of right now, like I said, it's okay for adults to recognize that we're experiencing trauma too. And I think as adults, we want to be those heroes for kids and push that off. And even though we're feeling that inside, we don't want to show it or recognize it. But it's so important to be those models for children, and to show that we are. Yep, I have grief because I didn't graduate, or I have grief because I don't get to go to Disney like I was going to in June. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot more other grief out there, but everyone has grief, and it's okay to accept that. The state has been providing lots of resources, and a lot of school districts I know have been delivering lunches to homes, which is a huge, beautiful thing going on. But I think it's scary too, because these students who have trauma, or students who have more profound trauma, there could potentially be in households that, like you said, that are not necessarily more dangerous, but not necessarily successful for their well-being. And I was in a recent professional development online, and they were talking about how the CPS cases have been going up, but CPS has been backing off because they're not allowed to go into homes right now because of the COVID. So that's a very scary thing to think about, is that a lot of students who, when we call CPS, teachers are one of the biggest reporters for CPS. And now there's all these students that there's potential for a lot of danger going on, and we're not there to support. So I do know school districts who are having officials try to go to the homes and try to see what resources we can provide to parents as well.
Ellie, you mentioned at the beginning of our talk what made you aware of trauma in your own life with the loss of your brother. But when did you first become professionally interested in trauma and special education?
I think it was all throughout my college experience. The more experience that I had with kids who are struggling with their emotions, the more interested I'm in. And so in the recent couple years when I began my student teaching, I was very drawn to the students who were going through a lot in their lives. And so I sought out professional opportunities to kind of build, because I just find it fascinating and interesting in how I can help those students as well. And like I said, with the lovely event in Oregon that was able, at the National CC, was able to help me kind of see, I attended many sessions on trauma, and that's kind of where my interest has just kept going from there.
What's the most important thing you've learned to this point?
I think back to the whole have empathy. You don't know, you can't judge a book by its cover. And I think another thing as teachers, that we're very, for students with trauma, we're very quick to judge their families. I definitely can be accountable for that. I see a child's, and I am thinking stereotypically of what's going on, but you never really know what's going on. You have to have empathy for every situation, and relationships are key.
How do you prevent burnout? That's hard work.
Yeah, it is. And am really impressed because Grand Valley is definitely taught at the College of Education. They provided us with a lot of resources talking about secondary trauma, which is what teachers can face as well when or compassion fatigue, when it's very hard to hear all these stories and see these kids, and but there's a lot of self-care out there, and a lot of self-care professionals who are really motivating and trying to help teachers. In this lovely pandemic, before I was running 100 miles an hour, working 5 jobs, and now I'm a dead standstill. But it's been really nice because I was able to focus on mindfulness, and now I feel like I have had the chance to be able to develop some more self-care tools that I can take and move forward. So I've been very grateful in that sense.
I'm glad you're taking good care of yourself. Now, as I said
you.
in the introduction, you were one of our stars at the Hauenstein Center's Peter C. Cook Leadership Academy. So you know this question's coming, Ellie. How did participating in our Cook Leadership Academy help you and change you for this incredible path you're on?
So before, I've always wanted to be a leader. I feel like we've talked a lot about in the Cook Leadership Academy that having that feeling of being a leader is very innate. A lot of the leaders that you've brought in for us to listen to, they always talk about that it's innate and it's that feeling inside. However, I struggle a lot with self-confidence, and I always worry what people think. I constantly thinking, oh, I can't say this or I can't do that because they're going to worry what I think. But what I really learned a lot from Cook Leadership is to believe in myself, and it's okay to accept that I have low self-confidence, but Cook Leadership's helped empower me and give me hope so I can give hope to other children, and they believed in me so I can believe in others. I know that's kind of cliche and corny, but there's so much that it's hard to put into words how much empowerment of the Cook Leadership Academy and how valuable that is. Not only with the support and like, you got this, and oh my gosh, like that is incredible, but also the opportunities. In addition to the opportunity in Oregon, this time last year, I was in Washington, D.C., thanks to the Cook Leadership Academy, and I attended the Washington Campus program. And there I was able to learn from leaders in education at the Department of Ed. And that's something I think about on a daily basis, that, wow, that's definitely a highlight of my college career.
Okay, now this next question is a little bit of a setup, but I know who your mentor is, and I want to ask you, how important is it that a student getting their degree, their credentialing, and their first experiences, how important is it that that student have a mentor through this process?
So shout out to Suzanne Richards right now. I know she's watching, so hi.
Hi, Suzanne.
She's been my rock throughout this whole thing. And what I can learn from that, or what I can try to teach to others, is that having a mentor like Suzanne, who's a rock star, gives you, once again, empowers you and gives you that hope that you can provide further and be a successful leader. It's so wonderful to have someone that has very similar aspirations as you do and move forward and helps guide you and kind of be that guiding light. And your own cheerleader. Who doesn't want your own personal pocket cheerleader?
Right. So what
Yeah.
happens now that you've graduated? What's the next step for you? You might want to speak to the short term and a little bit longer term.
Absolutely. So short term, right now I am teaching, I'll back up. I accepted a position before this pandemic, teaching for students with emotional impairments here in Grand Rapids. So I'm very excited to teach in a self-contained classroom for those students. But since all of this has happened, I'm also teaching virtually online, filling in for a teacher who passed away. And that's been a very eye-opening opportunity for me as well, to learn virtually and kind of see, oh, what's this going to be like in the fall? Are we going to have to teach virtually? But I think moving forward, I'm definitely going to take on more leadership opportunities. And I have to give another shout out to Suzanne, because she's helped me develop this 5-year plan and 10-year plan. And I think in 5 years, I'm really hoping to have my special education administration degree with emphasis in educational leadership, so I can help become a successful educational leader.
Very good. Well, I always like to ask students like you, if you think far into your future, or maybe not that far, but what would be the capstone of your work and career? And since you love theater, Ellie, what would be your Tony Award in your field?
So back to the Washington, D.C., I had the opportunity to meet with the director of special education at the Department of Ed, Lori Vanderplug, who actually is from Grand Rapids. She was the professor here at the College of Education for Special Education Administration. So it's pretty cool that we have a Grand Rapids native in a seat at the Department of Ed. But after leaving my conversation with her, I was like, that's the job I want. I want to be the director of special education at the Department of Ed. So it's a very ambitious career. So maybe something more towards the Department of Ed in Michigan. But I definitely would like to be a director and help inspire, kind of be the voice for children, but for teachers as well.
Good. Well, Ellie, we have viewers queued up to ask questions, so let's bring them into our conversation. We have one viewer who asks, what advice would you give an incoming student to GVSU? And that's probably almost a provocative question at this point, when those students are in a very uncertain situation right now. Many of them want to start, but we have COVID-19 out there. So what would you say?
I think biggest thing is find what your passion is and don't give up on all those opportunities. Immerse yourself in so many different opportunities, something that you might be like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. Try it, because you never know what's going to happen. And with COVID-19, I think it's really important to, we're so quick, and we talk a lot about this at the Cook Leadership Academy, we're so quick to judge ourselves. Get rid of that self-judgment and really focus on what being successful for you. Because if you're not happy as a person, then your career and who you influence, it's a continuous effect. So definitely find what makes you happy and go for it, and take advantage of every opportunity, because Grand Valley has provided so many that I cannot even begin to continue on.
And this is a related question. How has goal setting helped you through your education?
I think goal setting has helped me through my education because it's helped me put into perspective and keep thinking of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So having these goals, and when things get tough, and when I'm working 80-hour weeks and I'm crying in my bed because I can't get my homework done, I'm like, this is why I'm doing it. This goal's helping me. But also having those, telling people your goals, because it takes a village to get through everything in life. And I think it's important to have others be aware of your goals as well.
I have another viewer who's asking, what subjects are you really looking forward to teaching children?
One thing I'm really looking forward to teaching children is emotions. I know that's not a very specific subject, but when teaching students with emotional impairments, they really struggle on learning to regulate their emotions. And I think it's so much fun to help identify different emotions and help students work through those really tricky situations. But in a more academic sense, I love reading. So I have a YouTube channel where I read to children. It's really corny, but I love teaching reading and passing them the love of literacy.
It's almost as though you know the questions that are coming in, because that's a perfect segue to a question that just came in from a viewer. How have you been able to assist your current virtual students in learning? And then secondarily, how have you been able to assist those students process the death of their teacher? So both questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm going to try to answer that question in one. I think some students haven't vocalized with me a lot about the passing of their teacher, but the students that have, they'll come up and say, yeah, it stinks. And I will acknowledge saying, yeah, it is really hard, but think more of the memories, because what got me through my brother's death is focusing on those memories and those doing those traditions. So I've kind of turned that around and helped those students thinking, like one student, for example, she kept saying that her teacher kept saying every day, I am so proud of you, I'm so proud of you. And that's one of her memories of her teacher. So I told her to write that down and post in her wall. And so she was so excited. She sent me a picture yesterday. She goes, "Look, Miss Harnden, I have a picture of the quote on the wall." And that's a little inspiration for her. So holding on to those memories of their teacher and understanding that it's okay to grieve that death. Oh,
very good.
you're breaking up.
Ellie, is there anything else you would like to, can you hear me now? Is there anything else you would like to mention that we haven't covered? My question was, is there anything else you would like to mention?
Anyone else has any more questions? Oh, can you hear me okay?
I think you're breaking up a little bit. I do have a couple of new questions.
Okay, is it better now? Awesome.
Yes. All right. What's the biggest challenge for a new teacher having to teach online? That's a good question.
Yes, definitely. The biggest challenge for me right now is I've never met these students. I've never met the teachers that I'm working with. And that is a huge struggle for me because all teaching starts with has to have a strong basis on relationships. So I'm coming on to these students who don't know who I am. I'm a stranger online saying, "Hey, I'm here to help." And they don't know me. They don't know who I am. So I think it's really hard to try to build those relationships. You have to be very creative to build those relationships virtually and kind of build onto that, if it helps answer that question.
Well, very good. Well, thank you, Ellie, for sharing your story and inspiring our viewers with your passion for teaching children who have experienced trauma. The people who've tuned in can see now why you are so highly regarded at the Hauenstein Center's Peter C. Cook Leadership Academy. We wish you the very best. Thanks also to our viewers whom I invite to Zoom in or join us on Facebook at the same time, Tuesday, May 12th, when my guest will be Michael Kimmage, a history professor at Catholic University of America, who has also worked in the State Department. Dr. Kimmage has just come out with a provocative new book, The Abandonment of the West. And we're going to be talking about that book. Till Tuesday at 1 p.m. Stay tuned and stay well.